Recently, I was interviewed by the director of March for Life UK, and the focus of the discussion was the psychological impact of abortion on women. March for Life UK does fantastic and very important work in this area, and I'm glad to be able to direct people to their channel, which I've linked below. I hope you enjoy the conversation. God bless.
Hello, Greg. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Isabel.
Now, often people might know you as the Catholic psychotherapist because I know you've been doing quite a lot of videos online.
Yes.
But I know also more than that, you've been part of 40 Days for Life for a long time. You're a part of the Rachel's Vineyard ministry team as well.
Yeah.
So we've got quite a lot that we can talk about today with regards to this pro-life cause. I thought maybe a good place to start, Greg, would be just to look at the term psychotherapy. That's what you are. You're a psychotherapist. I know you have your own private practice.
Yeah.
But what does psychotherapy actually mean?
Okay, so the word in itself, so the etymology, as it were, of the word is the healing of the soul. So therapy means healing, psyche means soul. And that's, for me, it's a very Christian endeavor, really. So our blessed Lord came to heal us, and he didn't, he principally came to heal our souls. So psychotherapy is, to my mind at least, utterly a Christian thing to do. And I, as you say, I have a private practice and I work as a Catholic psychotherapist, and partly why I moved in that direction and away from the NHS, which is what I used to do, was because when I worked for the NHS or, just in statutory services, the idea of the soul wasn't there really. So there's lots of modern versions of self-help and psychology that don't touch upon the soul at all. They don't touch upon the faculties of the soul from a Christian perspective. They don't mention God at all. So it's very atheistic, very materialistic. And I guess what I do and my mission essentially is to put the truth of what psychotherapy is back into psychology and psychotherapy, which is that it's the healing of our souls as made by God, So it's a very Christian practice, I would say, just intrinsically, really.
I find that fascinating, really, because a lot of people will almost try and brand those who bring faith into it as, don't bring your faith or don't bring faith into that, into this sphere. But ones that don't, they aren't really qualified to be a psychotherapist in the true sense of the meaning of the word.
I wouldn't go that far. I know what you mean.
They might have the professional qualification, but if they don't understand what a soul is, how can they work on healing a soul? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like psychology has been studied for thousands of years. So Aristotle wrote about psychology, St. Thomas Aquinas wrote about anthropology and psychology. So the study of what the soul is like age old, and it's in the Christian tradition in the classical period. But modern psychology, like they say that Freud is the father of modern psychology, and he was an outspoken atheist and a materialist. He said there is no such thing as the soul.
Yeah.
And it stems from there, really, and I think that the rise of modern psychology has gone hand in hand with letting go of faith, actually, in society. So, no, I agree with you entirely that it's a strange set of affairs when psychologists don't believe the soul exists. It's crazy, really.
So what would be the difference then, Greg, between a psychotherapist and helping with that kind of healing of the soul to maybe like a spiritual director, which is a term that quite a few Christians might be familiar with? What would be the difference between those two?
So what I work with principally, putting it simply, is psychological disorder, so mental disorders. And there are such things as mental disorders, as such things as psychological normality and psychological abnormality. And I work to help people to move from a place of mental disorder or psychological abnormality to being healthy, psychologically healthy. Whereas a spiritual director, the principal goal of spiritual direction is to help us to become saints, to facilitate the process of deepening our relationship with our blessed Lord, to come to a place of union with Him. So there's definitely overlaps insofar as what I do entails talking about prayer, it entails talking about God, it entails talking about what the parts of our soul are for. So your intellect, for example, as a faculty of the soul, is given to us by God so that we can grasp truth. That's a function of the intellect. And when I talk about the grasping of truth, And that being mentally healthy, I have to talk about God. I've got no choice
Yeah.
because God is truth, you know. But I'm not doing it principally to help people to become saints, although sometimes it almost feels like I
Yeah.
am in a way. Like I say in a lot of my YouTube videos, I'm not a spiritual director. And I say it to clients as well. And some of them have said, you know, I appreciate why you're saying that, but in the absence of spiritual direction, you're actually giving a lot of spiritual direction.
Yeah.
With, you know, I know what unwittingly in a certain sense, right? But yeah, so technically, a psychotherapist is there to cure mental disorder,
Got you.
whereas a spiritual director is there to help somebody to achieve union
Yeah.
with God. So there's overlaps, but they're
Yeah.
distinct.
Yeah, I get you. So then, Greg, what drew you to doing pro-life work? And I know certainly with regards to 40 Days for Life, you've been doing that for many, many years, and then more recently you've got involved in Rachel's Vineyard. What attracted you to doing that?
Yeah, I was reflecting on this in the car driving here, and I think the first thing really is my mum. She was always dogmatically pro-life, and it, you know, I was raised in a very Catholic household, and my mum was outspokenly pro-life. I think she had something to do with the setting up of SPUC in Birmingham, because they weren't in Birmingham. She was part of that apparently. So it was always just absolutely true to me, my whole life, that abortion is gravely sinful. Basically, that we don't. The idea that a woman has the right to end the life of the child in her womb has always been so sort of naturally abhorrent to me that it was always going to happen, I suppose. I used to go to, well, as a family, we went to the New Dawn Conference in Walsingham over the years, which is like a Catholic charismatic type of conference. And there was a speaker there who spoke specifically about the pro-life movement.
Right.
And when I heard that, something just switched in my heart to, I have to do this. I've got no choice. I have to do this. You know. So I think that was a Holy Spirit moment, I guess. And after that, I didn't know how to do it. So there was many years where I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then somebody gave a talk in the church that I go to about the pro-life witness outside of the Calthorpe clinic that we both used to pray outside of.
So that was an abortion centre, wasn't it?
Yeah. And that just felt like a gift. It's like all of a sudden God's saying, this is what you can do. There's something you can do. So I grabbed hold of that, and that was the beginning of the journey. And that was about nearly 20 years ago. I was 27 at the time. So, you know. It's,
And any encounters that you had there that have stayed with you? I mean, you must have met a lot of people over the years. Anything that's stuck with you?
Yeah. The main one, I guess, I think I may have spoken about this before. I was there praying with a friend many years ago now. I don't know how many years ago. But there was a girl who came up, a lady who came up, and she was quite hostile with us and saying we shouldn't be there, saying that we were being disrespectful. And it emerged in our conversation with her that she had had an abortion. And as the conversation progressed, she was adamant it was the right thing to do, it was good for her, and she was happy to have done it. That's not the right way she said it, but it was the right thing for her. And at a certain point, I said it must have been a very hard time for her. I'm sorry that you went through that. It must have been an absolutely very difficult situation to be in. And as soon as I said that, she broke down in tears. So it completely changed. What happened was she broke down in tears and just walked away because she couldn't tolerate the compassion in a certain sense. You know, she couldn't take the fact that I was just understanding and identifying with the difficulty of the situation.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of talking to post-abortive women, that's the one that sticks out most in my mind, because it's very telling, actually, I think, that we can mask inner pain with, I'm angry at you, or you're hurt. Do you know what I mean? We can mask pain with so much.
And it's often not very, very far below the surface, is it? And
that's the mad thing, yeah. If you just scratch the surface, you can, for sure.
And considering at that time, were you in mental health at that time? I know you worked in mental health for quite a long time.
I must have been, yeah. So I've worked in mental health since I was 26, and I started there when I was 27, so it was after that point. But I was working as a psychiatric nurse at that point.
Yeah.
So not as a therapist, but yeah.
And were you, and I know this is something that other people have said to me, that, you know, that almost held back because they were thinking, oh, maybe other professionals might see me doing this work, or what will my colleagues think of this, and have almost sort of that in a negative way. Was that ever something that you were concerned about, whether it was your clients, if that was what you would call them, or service users? I'm not sure what the term is nowadays, but if they might see you or your fellow workers might see you, was that ever something that you worried about, or were you quite happy for them to see you there, and how did you feel about that?
I'd say I don't know if worried is the right word. I was concerned about it for sure. I used to talk up, I used to do sort of evangelical work in the city centre, talking about the faith and trying to just talk about the faith with people in the city centre, again, as part of a group. And one of my colleagues saw me doing that, and he came into work like the following week and said, "What were you trying to sell in the city centre the other day?" So it became apparent that you can be seen essentially by people in the workplace. And it always, I don't know if it always concerned me greatly, but it would never stop me. That was the thing.
Right,
so whether I was concerned or anxious about it at all, it was immaterial to me, because it seemed to me that it was, it was incumbent upon, I have to do this. Whether I'm concerned or not, it makes no odds. And outside the clinic I saw, I think I've spoke before, I saw one of the consultant psychiatrists came and spoke to me. Patients from the ward were there. They didn't actually approach me, but they were there at certain points as well. For the closing ceremony for 40 Days for Life, one of the years, one of the patients from the ward was there praying with us, and I was like, crikey, that caught me off guard, So, but it would never stop me, is what I'd say.
I mean, sometimes people say, one of the sort of accusations thrown against people who were praying outside the abortion centre is that itself is somehow damaging to people's mental health. Or could be affecting women who are using the abortion centre. What would your thoughts be on that if someone were to say that to you?
In a nutshell, that it's wrong. I think the example story that I gave earlier of the lady who was talking and she was very composed and a little bit hostile and then broke down in tears, like ostensibly if you're looking at that from the outside, you could say you made her cry, which is like, okay, if you want to, you could view it that way if you wanted to misrepresent what went on, but what actually happens is that people are carrying around a lot of pain, often a lot of trauma, a lot of sorrow, a lot of grief, feelings of guilt, shame, and they're carrying it around within them. And in our modern society, due to the fact that we say that abortion is a healthcare provision, so this is just there to help women, we're not actually giving them space to process the grief, to process the sorrow, to process the feelings of guilt and everything that's given rise to as a result of abortion. So what people are alluding to when they say that we damage people's mental health is the observation that when people come into contact with us, these things are brought to the surface a little bit. But that isn't psychologically damaging, it's the beginning of psychological healing, right? So that's the beginning of healing. So to say that we damage people's mental health by being there is sort of the opposite of the truth, insofar as what we give them the space to begin the healing process and to come to a place of freedom. So it's a dangerous, it's an extremely effective rhetorical tool in blaming us for being there, but it's also damaging to women to say things like that, I would say.
Yeah, and how do you feel about the fact that mental health is the main reason women will be getting an abortion? What I mean is under that provision in the law that says on the grounds of mental health you can get an abortion. That is why most women will get an abortion. It's not because of like a physical problem. Most women will be getting it to do with mental health. Do you think that is true, that somehow it's either beneficial to their mental health or that it could be better for their mental health to have an abortion than to have a baby? Which seems to be what the law is saying with that.
No, I don't. I don't think that's the case. I'd like to speak in as blunt terms as possible, just to shed a light. So how could it possibly be beneficial for your mental health to have somebody kill the child in your womb? It's insane.
When you say it like that, it does make a lot of sense, doesn't it?
It's to me, it's satanic. It's a satanic lie. It aggravates me, to say the least, right? Is it beneficial for your mental health? In the work that I do, which is working with the impact, the fallout, the psychological detriment of abortion, to even suggest that it was helpful for women's mental health is just an absolute slap in the face to the women who've had abortions and suffered as a result of it. And I think this space and what you do here in creating a space where women can say, actually, this hurt me, you know, is wonderful, it's beautiful, because it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. So no, abortion is simply never beneficial to somebody's mental health. It doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous.
What sort of symptoms do you see then for women who've been through abortion, if symptom is the right word? You know, how would that damage to them or that grief, how would it be manifesting itself? You know, when you're working with women, maybe through Rachel's Vineyard, with people who've been affected by abortion?
I think there's sort of different phases, really, because when people come to Rachel's Vineyard, they come there and begin to access the grief.
Right.
And grief in itself isn't a mental disorder. Grief is a normal response to the loss of somebody that we love, right? So grief isn't mentally unhealthy. Grief is mentally healthy, right?
Yeah.
So if you lose somebody and you grieve, that's good. If you do something wrong and you feel guilty, that's good. Guilt isn't mentally unhealthy. But there's this idea in, it's drawn sort of from a psychoanalytic tradition of there being an inner psychological conflict, right? So when we have an inner conflict, sort of two irreconcilable forces, it can manifest in very many ways, such as anxiety disorders are the big one, I would say. So prior to coming to Rachel's Vineyard, I know that people have had crippling and debilitating agoraphobia. They couldn't leave the house. Right. Or simple phobias. They just, not so much a simple phobia, a sort of generalized anxiety difficulty that they can make no sense of. They're like, I'm highly anxious most of the time, don't know why, struggling to get through. And what that's indicative of from a psychological perspective, when you've got this sort of ubiquitous anxiety, is that the anxiety is serving as a repressive mechanism that's burying something you haven't dealt with. Right? Okay. So that's one of the functions of anxiety. So in terms of psychological disorder, many things put us in PTSD. I've worked directly with post-traumatic stress disorder. I've worked with depressive disorders, mood disorders, anxiety disorders. But then when you come to Rachel's Vineyard, it's sort of the beginning of the end of the disorder and the beginning of the normal psychological processing of pain, of grief, which is normal pain, of guilt, which needs to be worked through the grace and mercy of our blessed Lord, right? So this is how we work through the feelings of guilt and shame. But yeah, so I like what you said, which is symptom the right word? At times it is, at times it isn't. We shouldn't label grief as a mental health symptom.
Yes, I think that's
normal,
important, isn't
right?
it?
And that's one of the things that I do. And I assess people, I try and ascertain, is what this person experiencing indicative of a mental disorder, or is it normal psychological distress associated with a bloody, terrible situation? And that's a distinction, right?
Yeah. So. And would there be a difference in the way it affects women to men generally, or could you just not say, is it very different?
I think what's more apparent is the commonality, to be honest. And again, I'd break it down into two again. So what you see in the aftermath after abortion is denial, broadly speaking. And again, that can manifest in many ways in terms of mental disorder. But again, when people come to Rachel's Vineyard and begin a healing process, you're seeing the same thing. You're seeing grief, you're seeing sorrow, you're seeing guilt. And yeah, so again, Rachel's Vineyard is a spiritual healing program rather than a psychotherapeutic program. We're not there to deal with mental disorders, strictly speaking, although it's there. But it's more spiritual healing and setting free, all right, spiritually. So.
Would you also say, Greg, do you think just the fact that sometimes gaining that understanding of yourself and maybe why you did what you did or what's gone on in your life, do you think that's a part of it as well as the healing? Or is that part of the healing, to understand yourself? Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. So one of the things that we say is that there are things that happen to us in our lives that can set us up to be more likely to procure an abortion, let's say.
Yeah.
So very often with people who come to Rachel's Vineyard, there is lots of historical trauma, actually. There's lots of childhood difficulty, abuse, neglect, and this can make us much more likely to consider abortion in the first place.
Right.
And that's definitely part of it. Again, not to relinquish responsibility or to relinquish accountability, you might say. But no, that's definitely part of it, insofar as there are some people who would never even countenance the idea of abortion just because they've had very well-ordered lives and they were very loved and they were guided in truth in their childhood. And thanks be to God, some people were like, well, that's the last thing, why would I do that, you know? But God bless many people who suffered a great deal, and when they come to the point of being pregnant, it's like it throws them into a state of confusion and fear, and that can set them up, as it were. So that is very important.
Yeah. You must have seen some quite powerful transformations then with your work with Rachel's Vineyard.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I'm not trying to breach any confidentiality, and I know what happens on a Rachel's Vineyard is very confidential, but I presume it's really touched you, the way that you've seen people change and be healed?
Yeah. And, I'm part of the team of Rachel's Vineyard, and what a lot of the team members say is that we gain so much through doing it, because when you see healing, when you see God's hand moving in people's lives. So again, there's two things. One, the psychological healing, psychologically being set free. But two, seeing what I would refer to as miracles of grace. Or I see people's, a deepening of people's relationship with God, a deepening of the realization that they're loved. This deepening of truth, of the grace of God in their lives. And for me, that's the more powerful thing, that's the more moving thing, and it's quite disarming, really. It's like, to see God's hand move in people's lives, it's like, all we can do is sit back and be thankful. It's amazing. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
How do we deal with this then in a culture that isn't even recognising there's a problem there to start with? It's not seeing the problem of abortion, and so therefore there's nothing to be dealt with. How do we kind of, I don't know whether challenge is the right word, or but just how do we deal with that in today's society for the average person?
With what you're doing, basically, with what March for Life are doing, with what 40 Days for Life is doing, bear witness to it. Right. So to my mind, abortion persists and is maintained in society because it's under a cloud of silence, a blanket of silence, where it's buried, And what we need to do is to bear witness to the truth. We need to pull back the veil and say, this is painful for people, this hurts people. Like I stated earlier in this conversation, how could it possibly be good for somebody's mental health to kill the child in their womb? And I felt cautious saying it, but it's the truth. Yeah. So even us who sort of work in the pro-life movement, the spirit of the age is so strong that to simply state the truth feels risky. Do you know what I mean? But we need to do that. We need to step out of our comfort zone and be true to our Lord, call a spade, and just state the truth, And March for Life is a fantastic way of doing it. It's beautiful.
Well, language is such a part of this, isn't it? Language has been manipulated so much. Yeah. And I'm sure just with the work that you must do, that is quite a key thing, to be very wary of the language that we're using. So often I even meet people who are very pro-life, who don't realise that maybe words they're using are kind of euphemisms or even actual lies, whether that's actually the term that we might be using for the baby or for the abortion, or even things like, when you hear people saying, there's a risk that your baby's going to have Down syndrome, as though people with Down syndrome are a risk, or there's a danger that your baby's going to have Down syndrome, as though they're dangerous, and we just repeat these terms without thinking about it. And the abortion movement is just littered, isn't it, with these euphemisms and lies that we can sometimes just pick up and therefore be sharing them without even maybe realising it, I think, at times.
I think you're right. We need to be a bit more forthright and blunt and straightforward with how we talk about things, Obviously...
to be sensitive,
in all things, love, in all things, love and kindness and compassion, But speaking the truth, fearlessly.
Yeah, I think there was there's a woman, Edith Stein, who I know is a saint within the Catholic Church, and she used to say about love without truth effectively it's a counterfeit love, and similarly truth without love, it's a counterfeit truth, and I think that is so true.
It's false compassion.
Yes,
it's false compassion.
We need very much both of them, don't we?
Oh, for sure, yeah. And it's freeing. It sets people free, right? So to offer people false compassion and say anything you do is fine isn't loving in the least, really.
Yeah. So how do we help those, Greg, then, who've been hurt by abortion? I mean, clearly, I know with your work, you're involved with Rachel's Vineyard, but for the average person, you know, maybe they might know people within their family or in their workplace who have had an abortion, and they don't really know how much it's affected them. Maybe it's just not really talked about. What do you think is the best place to start with something like that?
I think gently approaching the conversation, but again, having the courage to do so. Like I know exactly that. I know what it's like to be in that situation, so far as there's people in my life who've had abortions, and it's a difficult conversation to have.
Yeah.
But just again, to bring back the example I gave of the lady outside of the abortion clinic, just saying that must have been really difficult for you. What was it like? What was it like? What led up to that? How did it feel? And to gently explore and to give space. It's a little bit like with when people have miscarriages. I know people who've had miscarriages and they say, well, I don't really feel like I've got the right to grieve in a way. And I think that comes from an abortive mindset in society, because the baby in the womb isn't considered a baby in the womb anymore. It's considered a fetus, or worse still.
Yeah.
So to gently and lovingly broach the subject, talk about it in a kind, compassionate way that gives people space to just reflect on the experience, which is one of the things that you do in therapy, right? It's like creating a space for somebody to bring things to the table that they wouldn't even necessarily consider relevant,
Yeah.
And I think when we do that with our family and friends, again, people have told me throughout my life they've had abortions, and I'm like, crikey, that must have been hard. What was going on for you?
Yeah.
So just that gentle but loving broaching of the subject, I would say, in day-to-day life. Yeah, that would be the least.
And then, of course, we can then signpost people to, whether it's people like yourself, organisations like Rachel's Vineyard. We don't have to be the therapists actually, sifting through what they're saying and trying to work out what the right thing to say is. Yeah. I think sometimes just broaching that subject once you've realised that someone has had an abortion, to be able to direct them.
Yeah, I do that. So I assess people, and sometimes an abortion comes up during the assessment, and I'm like, well, you might want to think about Rachel's Vineyard. It's really good. Have you heard about it? And they usually say no. So I talk about it a little bit and say, well, that might be a better starting point than me, actually. That might be a better, so yeah.
Yeah. Has doing this work then, Greg, changed or deepened or affected your understanding of God's mercy? I mean, I know this has got to be a key element in the work that you're doing, helping people kind of tap into and recognise that kind of abundance of mercy. Has it affected how you feel about it and understand it? Yeah,
no, for sure. Yes, like as I was saying earlier, that we feel that we receive almost as much as the participants, in a sense.
Yeah.
Because when you see transformation in people's lives, and you're seeing love and mercy, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing the love of God touch people's hearts, and there's no way it can't touch your own heart, So when you're doing this repeatedly over time, and you're coming into contact with the mercy and love of God, it just deepens your relationship with God, which is what life is all about. We're here to know, love, and serve God, after all, So it's nothing but a gift. Like, for me, Rachel's Vineyard is nothing but a gift to me, and it's slowly transforming me as a person, I would say. Yeah. I mean, I know, obviously, I'm certainly no psychotherapist, but even just hearing some of the testimonies that women have told me, and men, over the years, I would certainly say that that's really, really helped me to deepen in my faith. I bet.
Just from the kind of openness and the way that they've shared them. So what would you say then, Greg, finally, if a woman or a man has been through an abortion, or maybe multiple abortions, but has maybe got that initial kind of fear of dealing with it, of opening up. Maybe they've never spoken to anybody, and maybe just feeling a bit fearful about doing that, certainly opening up that kind of wound that they're aware is within them. What would you say to that man or woman?
I'd say that taking the first step, when you're working with anxiety disorders, for example, when you're working with anxiety, ultimately facing the fear is the mechanism of change of overcoming the anxiety, basically, putting it in sort of technical terms. So if somebody is anxious, I often say to people in therapy, if I broach the subject of change, and they're like, just even thinking about that makes me anxious, I'm like, well, we're probably on the right road then. You know, that's probably what we need to do in order to get better, you know. And the same applies here. But what I'd say, it's non-committal. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're truly, genuinely not ready to access that, when you first speak to somebody from Rachel's Vineyard, I think that they'll gauge that, you know. So it's not like you'll be dragged and thrown into something that you don't want to do. It's just an initial conversation just to explore the impact it had, where you're at in relation to the abortion. And if it's like, maybe this isn't the right time, that's fine. Do you know what I mean? But I would say that taking the step and taking courage and working toward healing. I'd also say that God wants us to be free, right? He wants us to be free. He doesn't want us to stay trapped. So if we feel stuck with something, God doesn't want us to be there. Like often I work with clients one-to-one, and sometimes they say to me, I think God wants me to have this, like this is my cross to bear. And I'm like, no, this isn't a cross to bear. God wants you to be free. And I'd encourage people in that way, that it's God's will. He came to give us life in abundance and freedom and joy. He didn't come so that we'd stay trapped in a prison of darkness and pain. That's not why. That's not God's will for us.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And I liked what you said there about ultimately they're still in control. They can contact somebody, but they can choose whether to go further with it or not, or what that might be.
Yeah.
You know, you don't relinquish that from getting in contact with somebody who might be able to help.
No.
Well, thank you very much, Greg, for the ministry that you're doing, both your private practice. How can people maybe find out about that if they wanted to approach you?
I guess my main public presence is YouTube these days. It's the Catholic Psychotherapist on YouTube.
Right, okay.
I've got a website as well. If you Google Christian psychotherapy, if you Google Catholic Psychotherapist, I think I'm the first thing that comes up after the sponsored one. So there's that too. I think it's Christian Psychotherapy. I forget the name of the website now. I'm on Instagram as the Catholic Psychotherapist. But YouTube is my main public presence, I would say.
Brilliant. But obviously, if somebody's post-abortive, then maybe initially to contact Rachel's Vineyard.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I'm not saying don't come to me by all means, and we can have the conversation. But if somebody's looking for post-abortive healing, then rachelsvineyard.org is where to go, I would say.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. And just to say your name again, Greg Nolan. So if people are looking online to find you, then that's the one to contact. And thank you so much for all you're doing, Greg.
No worries. Thank you.
God bless.